Hey guys, I'm Jordy, and this is your guide to the fourth encounter in Icecrown Citadel, the Manic DPS race, and the Lich King's most powerful Death Knight, Deathbringer Saurfang.
The ground runs red with your blood!
Now, Deathbringer Saurfang is a one-phase fight where you're looking to manage the various dots and debuffs he throws out while handling the 5 blood beasts that he spawns without letting them touch you. One thing to keep in mind is his resource pool, called blood power. He'll gain energy over time from the various dots and damage he does, and as the bar fills up, all of his damage increases, including the damage from his dots that he's applied previously, so it's important to keep in mind that his damage spikes and then relaxes some as this bar fills. We'll go into exactly how this works once we cover what the actual mechanics are. Okay, so as far as raid comp, you're going to want to use 2 tanks and 4 to 5 healers. Depending on your raid's DPS, you can drop healers. Things get really frantic toward the end of the fight, and the sooner you can put him down, the better your odds are of not wiping to a big heal from Mark of the Fallen Champion. Another thing to consider is having a Warlock spec into Destro for this fight so that they can use Shadow Fury to stun the adds. It helps somewhat early on, and I'd recommend it if you're struggling with the Blood Beasts. Alright, so let's get into his abilities. First, he's got a simple dot called Boiling Blood that he'll apply to 3 random people every so often. This ticks between 5 and 10,000 damage and must be healed through. Note that this can be bopped to remove it. Second, every 20 seconds or so, he'll cast Blood Nova. This does a large amount of damage to a player and anyone within 12 yards of that player. So we have a specific positioning on this fight that you must stick to. More on that later. Next up, Rune of Blood. He'll apply this debuff to his current target, one of the tanks, and as your goal is to not heal the boss, you'll need to immediately tank swap so as to avoid healing him. Pretty simple, tanks just need to pay attention. Now the adds of the fight, 5 blood beasts. 40 seconds in and every 40 seconds thereafter, he'll summon 5 blood beasts. They take a second or two to wake up, and then they'll begin moving to their highest threat target. Now these guys hit hard, but are fully stunnable, slowable, and movable, so you'll want to have a plan for these. They also have a buff called Resistant Skin that makes them not easily AoE'd, so single target damage on each is the way to go. Additionally, if they do any damage to players, they give Saurfang some extra blood power, which you don't want to do, so avoid getting hit. We'll get into these guys more in the walkthrough. Finally, he's got Mark of the Fallen Champion. Every time Deathbringer Saurfang's blood power reaches 100, he'll put one of these permanent dots up on a player. These will now tick throughout the fight, so you must heal through them. If the person with the mark dies for whatever reason, the boss will heal 20% of his HP. This will mean a wipe. It's imperative you keep these people up. Oh, and he's got a Frenzy at 30% where his damage really ramps up. This just means we pop Lust at the end of the fight rather than the beginning to help shorten that phase. Okay, that's a lot of mechanics. Real quick, let's just talk about how they all interact with each other. Credit to the guys in Fight Club for summarizing all this. It made my job a lot easier. Alright, so Saurfang generates blood power when he deals damage with his spells or when his blood beasts melee. He does not gain blood from his own melee attacks or the Mark of the Fallen Champion damage. His damage increases by 1% per blood point up to 100%, and as his damage increases, the rate of his blood power goes up because he does more damage, which equals more blood power generation. Finally, while Mark of the Fallen Champion doesn't generate blood itself, it does tick harder as his blood power reaches 100. So you need to watch his energy, and when it gets high, use cooldowns to help mitigate deaths from the various dots and other things until it resets and his damage goes back down. Okay, let's get into the walkthrough and see how all of this plays out. Before pull, you're going to pre-place the entire raid in specific spots. This is how we placed ours. You're going to want to leave a couple healers and melee while your paladins stand in the back with Righteous Fury up on the chance that they can pull threat on the blood beasts, which is a good thing. We have our ranged spread out 12 yards apart from each other and stick to these spots. They shouldn't move for fear of getting hit with a blood nova and splashing it to anyone nearby, increasing the boss's blood power generation. The entire raid is placed here and is ready to pull. Someone starts the RP and we wait to go. About 10 seconds before the boss is attackable, all of your DKs should use their Army of the Dead. You don't want them alive when the first blood beasts spawn, as it will be very bad for a lot of reasons, so use it early and then they should die before that happens. Taunt the boss and go ham. As the off tank, once you see him apply Rune of Blood on his current target, the other tank, you must taunt immediately. It's critical that he doesn't heal from it. It will slow your kill and speed up his blood power generation. Alright, the first set of Boiling Bloods go out. We like to bop any cloth wares that get this dot early. Use 1 or 2. This helps slow his blood power generation even more. It's not strictly necessary, but something to consider. Alright, 40 seconds in, we have our first set of Blood Beasts. It's critical that you have a Hunter Trap down here to slow these as they spawn, and then begin in on these. For one of the back ones, a Ret Pally Hodge, a Rogue Stun, whatever, should be enough for the melee to kill it. Now the other 4 should be covered by your ranged. A well-timed Shadow Fury once they start moving gives you some extra time. Then, as they crawl out of the trap, a balanced Druid Typhoon can push them back in and really give you lots of time to pump into them. DKs can Chains of Ice if one gets away. Maybe taunt them back toward the melee if it really starts to move. Just make sure you don't get hit. Whatever you need to do to kill these without them hitting anybody. We like to assign the ranged on one side of the room, attacking the beasts that spawn on the other side of the room from them, and vice versa. This means the beasts have a longer time running toward them through that frost trap. It just takes a little finagling to get your ranges correct, but it is possible. Do your absolute best not to let these things hit you. If you have to boot away from them, blink, whatever, under no circumstances should you let them get you. Complicating this is if they're left up for 10 seconds, they will put an AoE slow out on the raid, so you won't have to run for long. They have to die ASAP. Once your assignments are dead, help your friends. These beasts have to be priority. Okay, so the beasts are dead, nicely done. Pretty soon you should see your first Mark of the Fallen champion go out. Saurfang casts this on a random non-tank player, and then his blood power resets back to 0. These marked players cannot die for the rest of the fight, or it's most assuredly a wipe. Here's how we assign the marks. Note that the 4th and 5th marks will be DIing the players. While this isn't strictly necessary, it does simplify the fight a fair bit and lets you drop some healers. While DI'd, they don't take damage and will just sit in it while the raid finishes the fight. So, Holy Paladin 1 will beacon mark number 1, then Holy Paladin 2 beacons mark number 2. At mark number 3, Holy Paladin 1 begins bombing heals into them. These 2 targets are now his priority, and he must keep them up. When mark number 4 goes out, you assign your Ret or your Prop Paladin to DI them, and then the same for 5. Make sure that they have Soul Stones so that they can pop back up. Important to note that if your Prop Paladin does DI, they need to do it when they're not tanking and right after a Rune of Blood has gone out, so they don't risk not being ready to taunt when necessary. Okay, so that's Mark of the Fallen Champion. Your marked people should be safely healed and the boss should be nearing 30%. At 30%, he frenzies. We lust at 25% for the Warlocks and then go hard, rushing to kill him before his damage ramps too high. Especially towards the end here, when you see his blood power above 50, you should really try to have some type of raid cooldown out on the raid at all times. DSAC, AM Devo, Divine Hymns, whatever you can to keep the raid alive and give your DPS a bit more time to pump into the boss. If you succeed, he should fall over, and good luck on that Deathbringer's will. Okay, let's talk about some tank tips. It's critical that you do not move the boss. The ranged and melee are used to where those blood beasts spawn based off of the boss position. So moving him at all is a big problem. Don't do it. When the boss's blood power ramps up and you have to taunt, use a cooldown. He really hits hard and the healers may not be immediately ready to hit you with heals, so use something to help them out, especially sub 30%. And for the blood beasts, it's important not to accidentally taunt them when they spawn. You don't want them hitting you at all, as it will give the boss blood power, so be careful. And for some healing tips, this fight starts off really slow, but then ramps up quickly at the end. You must stick to your assignment. Those marked people cannot die, so make sure that they get the heals that they need and pump hard into them. Save your cooldowns for the end of the fight and roll them as assigned. DSAC, AM Devos, Hymns, what have you will go a long way to keeping the raid up and damage low. And for the DPS, this is a DPS race that you really need to push out every bit of damage you've got while also respecting the priority targets here. Blood beasts must die or the raid wipes, so ranged use what you can on them to kill them ASAP. Balanced Druid Starfall is great. Typhoon, all of that stuff goes a long way to controlling them and getting them down fast so that you can return to Saurfang. And if you get Mark of the Fallen Champion, plan to watch your HP as his blood power goes up. You'll be taking a lot of extra damage, especially toward the end of the fight, so help your healers out with health stones, death coils, whatever you can to avoid ticking out and causing a wipe. Alright, well that's it for Deathbringer Saurfang. If you had what it takes to bring him down, you should have no trouble for the next 4 bosses or so on Heroic, which should put you comfortably at about 3/4 of this place dead. If you enjoyed this guide or learned something, do me a huge favor and like and subscribe. It helps me immensely in growing the channel and allows me to continue making this kind of stuff. And speaking of the channel, in the coming weeks, I'll have an assignment sheet that you can use for all of your raids featured on here, as well as a week aura guide with the brilliant Foji, and of course the Phase 4 loot prio guide that everyone keeps flaming me for. Like it or hate it, a lot of you want it. And if you want it a whole week early, check out mine or Pummel's Patreon, where I also have a lot more insight into my raids and easy access to me for any questions you might have about ICC or the game at large. Alright, well thanks for hanging in there with me on this one. I can't wait for Saurfang on live. It's a really fun fight, and good luck on your Deathbringer's will. See you guys in the next one.
Cassie's got a taunt coming up soon. I got sacked for Cassie.
Oh!
Let's go.
Alright.